U.S. whole-of-government takeover by Israel. Section 622 of the FY2027 Intelligence Authorization Act locks America into permanent, unbreakable intelligence entanglement with Israel. By Gen X Girl 1994. A whole-of-government entrenchment of Israeli influence is advancing through coordinated legislation that subordinates U.S. intelligence, defense, and foreign policy priorities to Tel Aviv's agenda at the expense of American sovereignty, interests, and taxpayers. Res. 1339 endorses Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan to shift the relationship from U.S. aid to mutual defense cooperation and joint investment, praising joint operations against Iran while pushing deeper entanglement. The U.S.-Israel Futures Act, H.R. 7540/S. 3855, formalizes this initiative with $150 million authorized, creating frameworks for joint ventures, co-production, and rapid fielding of Israeli tech into the U.S. military. Section 224 of the FY2027 NDAA establishes a U.S.-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative, tasking the Pentagon with synchronizing bilateral research, development, testing, and industrial integration across critical domains like AI, counter-drones, cyber, directed energy, and missile defense, explicitly prioritizing Israeli-origin technologies for integration into U.S. systems and programs of record. The U.S.-Israel Defense Partnership Act, H.R. 1229/S. 554, mandates a Defense Innovation Unit office in Israel, cooperative counter-unmanned systems programs, RDT&E on emerging technologies like AI and robotics, and efforts to fold Israel into the U.S. National Technology and Industrial Base, NTIB, alongside allies like the UK and Australia. Section 622 of the Senate's FY27 Intelligence Authorization enhances U.S.-Israel intelligence sharing by further embedding a foreign power into America's most sensitive national security apparatus and makes it nearly impossible to disentangle U.S. intelligence from Israel. These measures represent a dangerous erosion of U.S. autonomy by locking in American taxpayers, innovators, and warfighters into perpetual, one-way technology transfers and industrial dependencies that benefit a foreign nation first, dilute focus on domestic manufacturing, risk entangling the U.S. in endless Middle East conflicts, and treat Israel's security as inseparable from America's. Despite diverging interests, massive ongoing costs, and opposition to the U.S.-Israel relationship by a majority of Americans, this is incremental capture of key levers of U.S. government power by a foreign country, Israel. This article will focus on Section 622 of the Senate FY27 Intelligence Authorization Act, which has received little attention from the public. See the end of this article for links to articles related to the other bills. Section 662 of the Senate's FY27 Intelligence Authorization Act, S. 4615, U.S.-Israel Intelligence Sharing Enhancement. Senate Republicans led by Senator Tom Cotton, Republican Arkansas, are quietly advancing legislation that treats U.S. intelligence capabilities as a blank check for a foreign power. Section 622 of S. 4615, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2027, codifies and dramatically expands U.S.-Israel intelligence, sharing into near-permanent statutory law. Far from a routine authorization, this provision subordinates U.S. decision-making, restricts future presidential and congressional flexibility, and institutionalizes priorities that place Israeli security interests on par with or above America's own. This is a legal straitjacket designed to make disentangling U.S. intelligence from Israel extraordinarily difficult, regardless of future U.S. strategic needs, budget realities, or changes in Israeli behavior. Core provisions that undermine America's sovereignty. 1. Mandatory expansion of intelligence sharing shall expand, no opt-out. The bill states the President shall expand and enhance intelligence sharing with Israel on an ever-widening array of topics: cybersecurity threats, terrorism, sanctions evasion, adversarial technology proliferation, missile and drone threats, air and space domain awareness, and more. This sharing must extend to analytic partnerships and cover threats relevant not just to the U.S., but explicitly to Israel and its regional partners. Nowhere does the bill require Israel to align with U.S. positions, cease settlement activity that complicates U.S. diplomacy, or address documented intelligence risks, for example past espionage cases. It is effectively unconditional. This is dangerous overreach. U.S. intelligence resources, paid for by American taxpayers and developed through American ingenuity, are not an unlimited public good to be automatically funneled to Israel. Intelligence sharing should be transactional, conditional, and strictly limited to direct U.S. national security benefits. Codifying a blanket shall expand mandate removes leverage and turns sharing into an entitlement. 2. The Qualitative Military Edge (QME) mandate in intelligence law. Section 622 explicitly declares U.S. policy to structure security assistance and defense cooperation to help Israel maintain its qualitative military edge consistent with U.S. law. Placing this long-standing policy slogan into an intelligence authorization bill is not boilerplate. It is strategic. It links intelligence flows directly to the broader aid pipeline and signals that America's intel community must operate with Israel's military superiority as a guiding objective. Sovereignty rejects the idea that U.S. policy must guarantee any foreign country's perpetual military dominance in its region. This commitment distorts arms sales decisions, technology transfers, and now intelligence priorities to favor Israel even when it may conflict with broader U.S. interests. For example, maintaining relationships with Gulf states or avoiding unnecessary escalation with Iran. Taxpayers fund Israel's edge through billions in annual foreign military financing and cooperative programs, research and development. Embedding it here makes it harder to ever revisit these subsidies, particularly since both chambers of Congress have introduced multiple bills which pivot the U.S.-Israel relationship from straightforward military handouts to fully integrated so-called cooperative research, development, testing, and evaluation, RDT&E, in U.S. bleeding-edge fields like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, quantum computing, robotics, and automation. If these bills become law, this brazen heist of U.S. technological supremacy in domains where America outpaces rivals like China will be gifted to a nation with a documented history of espionage against U.S. industry and government and repackaging of U.S. technology as Israel innovation under the auspices of programs funded by the U.S. taxpayer. 3. Severe restrictions on reducing or limiting sharing. Perhaps the most anti-sovereign provision states that intelligence sharing with Israel cannot be suspended, reduced, or materially limited except on the basis of a specific and identifiable national security concern. For example, sources, methods, protection, or counterintelligence risk. Any such decision must be personally documented by the President with a detailed rationale. This is a direct assault on America's sovereignty. Future administrations, whether concerned about Israeli spying on the U.S., a documented historical issue, Israeli actions that harm U.S. interests, or simply the need to reallocate resources toward China, will face statutory hurdles and presumptive pressure to maintain maximum sharing. Sovereignty means the U.S. retains unilateral control over its own intelligence product. This language flips that cooperation is the default. Restraint requires extraordinary justification. It binds future Congresses and presidents to put the interests of Israel before the U.S. 4. Forced expansion to Abraham Accords countries. The bill requires the U.S. to expand intelligence, sharing, and analytic cooperation with any nations that normalize relations with Israel under the Abraham Accords framework. Priority areas include counterterrorism, cyber, air missile defense, and maritime security. This effectively uses U.S. intelligence as diplomatic glue to advance a specific regional architecture, whether Americans support it or not. American foreign policy becomes the enforcer or quartermaster for Israel's normalization deals. If Israel wants closer ties with Gulf states, they should manage the intelligence dimensions themselves and perhaps start by not being a genocidal pariah state. Dragging America deeper into integrated Middle East security architectures increases entanglement risks and tripwires for U.S. involvement in future conflicts. 5. Heavy congressional notification requirements that favor continuity. Any material change in sharing triggers a 15-day notification to intelligence committees including detailed justifications, impact assessments on Israel and regional partners, and effects on integrated defense systems. Annual reports for 5 years must track categories of intelligence shared, progress on regional integration, and any barriers to deeper cooperation. While oversight sounds good, the structure is one-sided. It creates bureaucratic and political friction, primarily around reductions while encouraging ever greater integration. This tilts the scales toward permanent entanglement rather than prudent interest-based adjustments. Congress should strip Section 622 entirely. Section 622 passed the Senate Intelligence Committee with little public scrutiny. It mirrors parallel efforts in the House NDAA to deepen technological and military ties. Together, these provisions represent a concerted push to make the U.S.-Israel relationship more ironclad and less subject to democratic accountability. Americans deserve a foreign policy that puts their security, prosperity, and sovereignty first, not one that treats intelligence cooperation as a perpetual hard-to-exit subsidy. Congress should strip Section 622 entirely. Anything less is a surrender of America's sovereignty. Gen X Girl Files is a reader-supported publication. To receive new posts and support my work, consider becoming a free or paid subscriber.